Welcome to the Pixelated Perfect podcast. Hey Anna, welcome to the Pixelated Perfect podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so I'm super excited to have you kind of walk through your journey and your story. For some background for everyone, Anna is a part of the design team at the design project. You've been with us for a year now? Crazy time.
Yeah, a little more.
Crazy. And Anna has been an integral part of the team. She's worked with quite a few of our customers. She was with one of our customers, the longest customer we've ever had, which is pretty awesome. So super excited to dive a little deeper and to hear more about her background, where she comes from. I know she's definitely more of a self-taught, so I think that's going to be really interesting to dive a little deeper on some of those aspects and kind of like her journey and what's next. So so let's go ahead and dive in. And I would love to hear a little bit about how you got into product design. I know it's been a little while since I've heard this story, so I think that'd be really, really great.
Yeah. I actually went to school for advertising, and kind of took me those 4 years to realize I did not want to work in advertising. I just really liked the visual side of it, so I kind of realized, maybe like design was really where it was at for me. And yeah, I just started with like graphic design, got my first job as like the sole designer for like a grocery store chain in Puerto Rico, where I was doing like everything, print, digital, a little bit of web, everything. And then moving to New York, I really like loved the tech scene, and got like one of my first jobs there was at a startup. They basically made like any sort of glass display into like an interactive screen with like some like projection technology and some AI, some machine learning. So my introduction to that stuff was like pretty early on, before I even called myself like a UI, UX product designer, anything like that. So yeah, that's kind of how I got my footing.
Yeah, I would love to hear. So I would love to understand a little bit more, when you were the sole designer of this graphic design chain, from someone whose first job out of more of an advertising background coming into this, what did that look like for you? Like, how did you figure out how to design from no one to teach you?
Well, I think before I got that job, when I was actually creating my portfolio, I learned a lot in the process of making my portfolio. So I knew some basics through there, but it was really just a lot of Google and YouTube. Like I think I think I've gotten more like knowledge and experience from like those two websites than like my entire like 4 years of college, for sure.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I actually want to unpack that a little further because, so for me, my background in graphic design, I went to school for graphic design. I majored in graphic design. I graduated. I got my first job. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know nothing. So I did a lot of Googling and I did a lot of YouTubing. And so I think that's really interesting, that also kind of was like how I figured out the industry. What was it? Can you recall what was it that you were like Googling and YouTubing? Was it like how to use Photoshop, or was it like, I don't know, what colors look good together?
Man, it really depended, because sometimes I didn't even have like the terminology really to know what I was looking for. So I guess like that's just attributing to like Google's greatness, like their ability to read your mind. If you're just like, that thing where it's like, whatever, like they totally understand. So a lot of that was just like literally just absorbing everything from like these Google searches, and like my Google searches would go deep. So like I don't know, I'm the kind of person that like can easily open like 20 tabs, and I have a hard time like narrowing it down. Just yeah. I don't think that feeling ever really goes away, of like feeling like you don't know what you're doing and you just need to like learn as much as possible. Yeah.
What was it that you were YouTubing at the time? Was it kind of the same thing as Google? Is like you would be Googling something and then you'd be like, oh, I need to figure out and actually watch a video on how to do that and how to watch how they actually created that thing that I found on Google.
Yeah, a lot of it was like it was very much the combination of those two working together, because I would learn the terms from my Google searches, and then I would take those terms to like form the actual like phrases that I mean into YouTube, and then find like a vast like, source of info. So it was just like opening up like all these videos and new windows and then just watching all of those. So it was a lot easier once you get to that YouTube stage, because they just have so much stuff like recommended to you that you're like set.
You go down the YouTube rabbit hole,
Exactly.
never get out.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to today and the resources you're using. So you started with Google, YouTube. Have you evolved? That's the wrong choice of words, because we always still use Google and YouTube. But are there any other resources that you really love to use as inspiration, or just to Google terms or figure out I don't know, learn something new? What would you do now?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, because I still Google a lot. A lot of my stuff still like stems from Google. Like I maybe know more of the terms of what I'm looking for now, so maybe my searches aren't as exploratory as they were initially. But a lot still stems from those like initial searches. I think that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm trying to find like some staples that I constantly go back to, so I don't have to even like think about like, oh, what sites would be good for this. Like I want to just already have like my own sources, like embedded in the process.
Yes, yes. And that's always the challenge. I feel like there's always like these new trendy sites to go to, and you're using those for inspo, and then there's the next new trendy site. And like
Yeah. There's no shortage of resources, and in a way it can be very overwhelming.
That's true. Like, which one's the best one? Which one's the right one? How many should we go to? Yeah, and I know at the design project we're trying to, and you've helped put together like a resources page. Like these are the resources that some of the designers use, and I think that's been really helpful for us to kind of at least have a starting point. But yeah, it is very, very overwhelming. That's interesting to think about, like how can we solve that problem? How can designers solve how to create like a one size fits all resources? And I think there's so many out there. Going back to kind of this, you as the sole designer of this grocery store chain, you said you did a little bit of everything: web, graphics. What was it that kind of, or maybe it wasn't at the shop, but what kind of guided you into product design? Was it in your next position?
It was, well, the digital stuff, like tech, absolutely. It was more, my experience had always been, or like up until that point of my first like startup job, just web design, very basic, like on a CMS, like WordPress or whatever. Pretty much just that. And that was pretty much the deal with what they needed, pretty much just like a website. It wasn't too high tech in the grocery industry.
No.
No.
Well, now everything
I
they're
did
doing. So there's such a thing as high tech grocery stores now.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. What was I gonna say?
Maybe you'll think of it.
Forgot it.
We'll come back. You let me know when it pops in your head. Oh, you
Oh,
got it?
well, I actually, yeah. So I did more like physical product design, like designing a line of private label products. Actually, they released their own in-house line of spices, bottled water, and like some like prepackaged foods from like the deli and stuff. So a lot of it was like physical packaging, like product
Yeah, that's
design
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, it's like where you have
Yeah.
to actually like go create dye lines, work from dye lines, and go check the printer and see how the packaging is formed. Yeah, what was that process? Was that you kind of getting a design brief and working on it, or did you have a team that you were bouncing ideas off of? How did you get that into like that final production stage?
Yeah, that's the thing about being a sole designer is there's no team. If something doesn't like already exist, it's like, okay, well, you're the designer, so you know how to start it. So I think that although it's not what I do today, really, like it was a good lesson like how to start things from scratch and just like figure it out cuz like no one else is really going to figure it out for you. And a lot of that is just goes in hand with like being self-taught. You kind of learn like the hard way or the longer way, but definitely hands-on.
Yeah. Let's I want to talk about being the sole designer and no team because you started out in the sole designer space. I guess I want to go back to because we already started here. And then I think your next position also was you were one of the sole designers. Was there a team or you were the only designer?
So I had a creative technologist.
Okay.
He wasn't a designer, but he had like more development experience. So I would create assets and then he would program them.
Mm,
Like, make them like move and do cool things.
very cool. So what are your thoughts on working in a team versus being a sole designer? Is there one you prefer? Is there one that maybe you would recommend to another designer that's starting off kind of jumping in without having any experience and being self-taught?
I mean, I think what I would have really loved, and I wanted this like my entire design career, regardless of what I was calling myself, was a mentor. Like, I don't feel like I got that experience and I was desperately seeking it. I feel like being self-taught is great. Like you really learn to take initiative and just be kind of just like operate that way. But to have someone just it's just nice to have someone to like look over your stuff and tell you like, oh, it's actually like better if you do it this way, or there's just a bunch of random like tips that we all like pick up collectively. And I feel like sharing that with each other is sometimes like one of the most useful ways to like pick up good nuggets of info.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I never had that mentor person either, and I think that's something that I really wish I would have had as well, and really like searched for it and sought it out and kind of made it happen because I feel like I tried and I was like, oh, it's not gonna happen. But maybe that is kind of a lesson, or maybe if you're starting off, if you're mid-level, wherever you are in your career, maybe finding that mentor could kind of be that missing piece that you're seeking.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did get close once. LinkedIn had this they had a pretty cool program where like you would sign up for free if you wanted like essentially mentorship, like someone to reach out and be like, "Hey, how do you like what do you want like help with?" Like there's some sort of pretext that they're going to help you out. And when you're looking at who are these like potential advisors, they have in their little like profiles like their areas. So, you know, if I'm interested in like art direction, I'd look for someone who's, you know, it has like a matching bio or whatever. And I met someone who was like pretty, like not super hands-on, but like pretty proactive about wanting to like have a conversation, actually like talk, not just like message on like Messenger or whatever. And he did give me some good info, but like it really couldn't progress because like at the time I was doing brand design and he was actually like very well versed in UX UI.
Interesting. It's like bad timing.
The timing did not work. Yes. Yeah.
Oh man, have you ever thought of reaching out to him again?
I do. Every now and then I
Oh,
do, but I'm like,
so much time has passed. I feel like it's like online dating or something. You're
yeah,
like,
I
I
don't
started
know.
chatting with him and then wasn't the right time.
Would he, yeah.
Would he still
Is
be
he still like
interested?
even open to that? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's mentorship is like dating, you know?
yeah, I think that's a takeaway from today. Mentorship is
Yeah.
like dating. Agreed. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about your first job when you moved to New York and working in the AR VR field. And this was like right now AR VR is super super trendy. But this was a few years ago, right? Like kind of before that big.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Like, you know, being a startup, we talked with a lot of like investors and founders from other companies. We went to tons of like these little like startup events in New York, which like there's a lot of startup events in New York for basically every like sub sector you can think of. Yeah. And in having a lot of these conversations, people didn't really seem to understand like a usage for AR outside of like Snapchat. Like that was, I guess, the biggest app that used AR at the time. So like that's all people really knew. Yeah, and it was seen as like kind of like a fad. Like it really wasn't taken seriously. And I think VR was very similar. My partner works in VR and he had a lot of the same conversations that I was having.
Yeah. How could you go about designing for like an industry that wasn't really there? How were you able to tackle that?
Well, a lot of it was through like partnerships. When you think about it, like what kind of businesses would benefit from making their like, you know, windows interactive? There's really a lot that you can do with that. A lot of businesses, especially in New York, where like foot traffic is everything. So I think it was just a lot of like partnerships with people in which we would pitch ways that the tech can work for them. Like they would tell us, we actually had like a skincare client that was doing like a holiday pop-up shop, and the pop-up had window displays and they wanted to like have some sort of like something on there to make it, you know, extra special or like really like garner attention on the street, which in New York can be like a pretty hard thing. So like we pitched a bunch of concepts for how they could use the screen in front of like Soho. And yeah, they like chose a concept, we revised, and I created assets working with their like design team, and then worked with the creative technologist to like make the assets and the tech work together to create the experience that we wanted to make. So it was a lot of just like proving by showing.
Which is, yeah, that's interesting. Proving by showing is a lot of what us as designers have to do too, right? Like a lot of times we'll have concepts and we'll have to get to that wireframe stage. Sometimes it's even the UI stage before they're like, oh wait, this doesn't make sense. We hope it doesn't happen at that stage. But a lot of the times some of these concepts are hard to grasp, especially like UI UX best practices, and they need to like see it or see what pulling inspiration from what others are doing. So I definitely can see how that would also be relevant in the AR VR world. What programs were you using to design, or what was the technologist using to build?
I don't remember too much now of what he was using. I was using like Illustrator, Photoshop, and After Effects. That was pretty much as complicated as it got. A lot of our apps were web based, so a lot of it was just like coding. I don't know how many platforms he used outside of, what knowledge he came with.
Right. No, I was just curious. I don't know what they use these days either. So I guess I actually want to take one step back because I'm curious. How did you like set up your portfolio, or what was that? What was that experience trying to get that first job in New York with your experience as the designer at the grocery store chain? Was it fairly easy for you at that time, as I think it wasn't like super trendy as it is now to be a product designer or a designer in general? Or was it a challenge during that time too?
It it kind of, yeah, it was a challenge cuz like different jobs had different descriptions for the same titles. Especially the more like tech focused it got, it seemed more vague. I frankly wasn't sure like what got me hired with the startup company.
Your winning personality and your great design skills.
It was my smile.
It was your smile.
It was my smile. Yeah. The job was like it was actually pretty big. It was like general creative or something like that. So I wasn't even sure like what I was going to be doing, if my experience was relevant, like what my job was going to look like. It was pretty impossible to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it always goes back to kind of like you being a designer and coming up a designer on your own. You built your own skill set, and so I think you weren't as afraid to go into these unknowns because you knew that you could kind of tackle and handle anything. You knew you had your best friends Google and YouTube to guide you.
Yeah. I kind of knew, well, I can't know less than I know now, so.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, why not?
That is true. That is true. Um, so let's kind of fast forward to the past couple years. What have you been doing? How has your career kind of shifted and changed?
It's been, I think, a lot more well-rounded. Well, I left that job and did freelancing, so it's going to be, an array of clients and what they need. Yeah, it was pretty sporadic and like with a lot, I think it was just like connections at the time. Most of it was just like basic web design. So it was like just like basic CSS and assembling, on like a CMS. You'd be surprised how many people just can't like handle like assembling on like a management like system. But yeah. Well, also it could be like we're predisposed to be like, oh, okay, dashboard, cool, instead of being like scared.
I mean, I guess I think of if someone pulls up Excel, I like immediately push it to
Oh
someone
my
else.
gosh, that's so true.
Yeah, like I fall
Oh
asleep.
my
Like I
gosh.
literally, it like makes me tired. Just thinking about Excel, I'm like,
Yeah. Yes. I had to use like Outlook for the first time like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, what is this?
right?
Like don't make me do anything with Microsoft, please.
One of our customers,
I mean, I can.
right? One of our customers uses Microsoft Teams, and that's hard. I think it's hard for us designers slash Mac based
Yeah.
designers. It's just like not built for
I'm
us.
assuming, yeah, I'm assuming it's what it's like in with those couples where someone owns an iPhone and the other has an Android.
Right. I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say that I literally, if you put a PC in front of me, I like wouldn't know what to do. I would be like, what is this? I just like nothing. Which isn't a good thing. I'm not bragging. Like that's not a good thing. I should open my world a little bit.
Yeah, it should be, what is it, like ambidextrous?
Right.
In a way, digitally.
We can use all the things. What would you say to a designer that was looking to make that jump into the freelancing world?
I would say you should be really comfortable talking to people, all kinds of people. Yeah, because I think that's the biggest thing about freelancing is everything outside of design, like managing clients and like understanding what they mean because they're not like visual people, and like what they want even though they can't come up with the words. Literally like learning how to read people's minds.
So, if you want to become a freelancer, step one, learn to read people's minds.
Mind read.
Mind read.
Yes. Telepathy doesn't hurt. But yeah, you just gotta like know how to deal with people and be comfortable with it.
That's a really, really great piece of advice, and I don't think that's usually the first thing people say. And that is so true. I think to be able to make that jump, it's like you got to be able to communicate. Like you gotta, or you're not gonna make it.
I mean, I knew like okay, it's not the steadiest thing in the world, so let me like prepare for this. Like I feel like I prepared in all the common ways that you would think freelancer life would like, operate. So that was probably like just the one thing like I wish I would have known before going into it.
And I think you also mentioned this as like all of those additional things that you're doing, like PMing, you're project managing, you're leading calls, you're
bringing the process.
bringing the
You
process.
were literally like if you don't mention it, sometimes like it won't even happen, which is just chaos. Like you are literally in charge for organization.
Yes, yes. And what did that look like for you? I think that you're a fairly organized person, but was there a point where you were like jumping and you're like, oh gosh, I have to figure out my whole process and my organization? What did that look like?
Yeah. Like, I talked to the besties, Google and YouTube, as much as I could, but ultimately it was kind of trial by fire. Taking the plunge, taking a project, dealing with like a new client, seeing what that relationship, building a relationship, and just, seeing how that goes. A lot of my experience managing is from freelancing. A little bit from my startup, but mostly freelancing. It's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, and it all falls on your shoulders in the end, right? Like it's your responsibility. It's you can't go to your boss, you can't go to your manager. Like you are it.
Yeah. And, I don't know how many people realize just how important process is, like how much process dictates success. Because if you're not, it's essentially a roadmap. And if you're not following any particular roadmap, if your client isn't particularly decisive, it, it can quickly just get crazy.
Yeah. No,
So,
totally. I think that's an amazing point. Yeah, freelance life is hard. It has its challenges. But one of the things you also mentioned was like balance. You want to talk a little bit more about how freelance has given you that?
yeah, definitely. I think one of my biggest reasons for leaving like the 9 to 5 type of deal was just like honestly stress. It was starting to affect me physically, like in my body. Like I was holding that stress outside of work hours, like on the weekends. It it never really seemed to go away. It wasn't like situational. It wasn't just like, oh, this is just a stressful project, like, once we reach that deadline. There really didn't seem to be like an end in a way. So I needed to just take a step back and just reflect a little more on like what kind of design work was making me happy, and also like what kind of things outside of design I needed to make sure like, my cup is full to be able to like do my work regardless of what it is. So some like the first few months of that was pretty slow. I didn't like dive into like my Rolodex of people I knew and start advertising for new projects and stuff. I kind of just took a few weeks to like just think about what I wanted and think about like the trajectory so far and like, where do I want to go from here? Like I got at that point had gotten thought I was going to go into branding and graphic design and, whatever. Ended up really liking that UI UX experience, like testing apps and working with the developers were like the highlights of that startup job. So I just wanted to like know where does this all go? How does this all like fit together? Like what am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, and I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of people they have this career trajectory and they always think, oh, I have to get to that next step, I have to get to that manager, design lead, whatever that looks like, because they think that's like what is set, like that is the only right. And do they even want that? Are they good at managing people? Like, do they even think about like taking a step back and understanding what they want before just diving into something like that career trajectory?
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. I don't know how people do that.
Me either.
Yeah.
I think that kind of taking that time and reflecting is such a powerful thing that you recognized within yourself and knew that that was going to make you happy. And also knowing that work is not the driving factor, right? Like you're a designer, you love design. I know you love design, you have a passion for it, and you have other passions and you have other interests and you explore them and you make sure to give yourself that time to explore a little bit of everything that you're interested in. And that keeps your cup full.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah,
what would you
exactly.
recommend to other people that wanted to kind of like take a step back and maybe rethink? I know you said you spent some time thinking about it, you thought of your trajectory, but were there any tools or anything you could tell someone else to start with?
I don't know. I think it really depends on the person. Like some people need a certain level of assurance to know they're on the right track. Others just need, a little more time. It's I feel like everything, my whole career has been experimentation. So I would just always go back to that. When in doubt, experiment. Think that's really the only way you know what's working, what doesn't, what you like, what you don't, and where you want to go from there.
And I think maybe what we could recommend for whoever's listening and thinking about this is to take that time, to give yourself that time to explore. But yeah, when in doubt, experiment. I really like that. And I think a lot of people just don't take that time. They just plan it all out, which is interesting because you're a plan. You like to be organized. I actually don't know. Are you a planner? Do you plan things?
I think, yeah, like I don't like surprises really.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a surprise vacation. I'm always down for a surprise vacation.
You wouldn't mind that? No? You'd be okay?
No.
Could you just hop on a plane without knowing?
Tomorrow. Yes.
You could?
Yes. Absolutely. Just tell me hot or cold weather.
There you go.
I got the rest.
I think I would say like, oh yeah, I could totally be down for a surprise vacation, but I think I would like be like, oh gosh, what if my partner's planning something and I could plan it better?
Wow. The anxiety of
not like taking
of knowing you would do a better job.
I don't know what that says about me. That really that's like the truth though. That came out very accurate. But yeah, no, I think I really like that. I really like when in doubt, experiment and just like being open. So what was some of that, what came out for you in that time that you were thinking about the future? Like, so I guess what is next? Where do you see yourself? What are you passionate about?
Well, I think I kind of did. It was in that pause that I did have this like eureka moment where I realized product design was a lot of what I was looking for. It really it was user focused. I felt like a lot of the like hardest things about my job was just like things that didn't really serve the user. Yeah, when I wasn't doing strictly UX. And yeah, I don't remember what was the question?
Oh, what came out of that time you took to process? Like what's next for you? What were more of those aha moments, I guess?
Yeah, I realized product design was like what I loved. It was the QA testing that I was doing. It was centering the user, which was like essentially the compass that I used at work for like everything that we did. And this was when I was still just doing, general design. A lot of those pieces, a lot of like kind of my ethos with design and what I cared about, like the behind the scenes stuff, like process, for example. I realized all of that, like product design touched in some way or another. So like, I still think product design is pretty vast. Like you can look at 2 product design jobs and they can be completely different. But it was a big enough umbrella that focused on just enough of these things that like really were already kind of embedded in my design work already in a way.
Yeah, what just stuck out to me when you were saying that is you really loved focusing on the user. Like in your past jobs as a graphic designer, that's something that you kept going back to. And I think for a lot of us who, when we started design, product design wasn't a thing. And so we kind of found ourselves wanting that research, wanting to understand users before it was what it is today. And so, yeah, like you had this epiphany moment, this aha moment of like, oh, I really enjoy focusing on the user. And now at that point, you knew that product design was a thing and you could take that path and kind of combine your love of graphic design, of visuals, and being user centered.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And process, because a lot of UX is very much process. Very much process.
Yeah. I think it was important that whatever I focused on had enough variety in it that I wouldn't like get bored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think product design is pretty perfect.
Every day's a little different. Like,
Yeah, you never know what you could be asked to make.
true. Like, yeah, that's very interesting. Like every project we go into as a designer, like it's not straightforward. It's never going to be the same ever.
Yeah.
So you got to be a little like crazy, I guess, in that sort, since there's only so much planning you can do and there's going to be unknowns always.
You have to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with a little of that unknown. Just always being there.
Yes, it will always be there. Yes, so if you are thinking of getting into product design and you're not currently, know that it's always going to be unknown. There are going to be elements that are unknown, which is exciting for some of us.
It should be. It should be.
If it's not exciting to you, then you're not in the right career.
Maybe not. Yeah. Yeah, if you need to know everything about how to do your job on day one, product design is not for you.
You should go.
Product design is always changing,
Right.
too. Yeah. It's just impossible to know everything. Because the moment you do, it's different.
That's when people ask me, like, in this point in my career, what's like a takeaway I have now versus maybe when I was starting or mid-level. And I say it's that, like, I've learned that I know nothing. Always. Like, question everything in the best way. You're never going to know what you're going to be working on next. You're never going to be an expert. Like, you're always going to, in the design world, there's just so many things that you can always be learning and getting new insights in. That's also, the industry is changing so rapidly too. Like, what's next? We have no idea.
Yeah.
So being open to that and being open to knowing that you're never going to have all the answers.
Yeah. Always being down to learn and flexible. I mean, good qualities to have as a person regardless, but comes in handy extra in product design.
It does. So one of my final questions for you is, with your cup half full, what are these other parts of your cup that bring you joy? What are these things outside of design that you're passionate about that you've been doing on the side?
So I think it's not like totally left field that I went towards design, because I have a background in art, pretty much like competing since I was a child, like in elementary. I think my elementary school, like kindergarten, first and second grade, 3 years in a row, I won first place for like Ocean Week, like this Ocean Week art contest that we had in elementary school, school-wide.
What did you
Every
make?
year I was in it. And I didn't win third grade because I went to a different school. They didn't have Ocean Week art contest. So my career stalled, but it picked up later on. But yeah, I always loved drawing, and I think my dad was into it too, when he was younger. And I remember actually when I was pretty young, he would still sporadically like do it. I remember like the last thing, when I was like maybe in elementary school, he took me to an art store and bought like a bunch of like nibs, like pen nibs. And he was like practicing like calligraphy. He was doing like the lettering. He's a maintenance man for reference. Like there's nothing related to
He
that
just
in his
loved
job.
art. He just loved picking up that pen.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so random to me. Still now, thinking about it and who he is. I think maybe I got some of that in just always being down to like, no matter what the ask, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll dive into that.
Just keep those creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So definitely, art is still a pretty big thing. A lot of digital art nowadays, but really love all medium. I'm not like the best at it, but I don't necessarily do art to be the best always. I think that's one thing that makes art pretty therapeutic is that I'm a perfectionist. Like in design, I can very much like be a pixel pusher, which can be bad if you're trying to be speedy. So sometimes I try to like not, especially with like wireframes and stuff, not get like too like, yeah. I really struggle with that. So like art kind of forces me to like confront not being good at everything the first time, not every stroke being perfect the first time around, and like, just learning, just seeing visually that trying and failing, trying and failing, trying and failing makes beautiful things.
I love that. Yeah, and that's one thing I think we've talked about before too, is like you do have that balance and you do take that time to do other things, do other art. And I find that really inspiring for me personally, because I spend all day working for other people and designing for other people, and I don't take that time to just design for myself. And I want to, because I see the beauty of it. I see how it could be therapeutic. I think us creative people like always want to use our hands, always want to be working on something and doing something for yourself where it doesn't have to be pixel perfect, just something interesting. Like I love that you do that. And I think that's a great lesson for everyone, is like find that balance and do those creative things for yourself, outside of your everyday creative work.
Yeah. Critical.
Well, I think that kind of concludes our talk, where we've made it all from the beginning to now,
To today.
to today.
To right now.
We tackled a lot of concepts. We talked a lot about being self-taught, and what that takes to be self-taught, and I think that keeps you really open and experimental in your career always. We talked a lot about our best friends Google and YouTube. We did spend some time talking about process and kind of what a UX designer is. Let's see. What else did we talk about? We talked about the cup the cup all the way full.
Filling
Your cup
Yeah.
all the way. So yeah, I think we definitely went in a lot of different directions. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It was really great to learn a little bit more about your background and where you came from, and kind of self-care as well, which has been super awesome. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you remotely in the office tomorrow.
Yeah. I'll see you tomorrow. Bright and early.
Bright and early. Awesome. Thank you, Anna.